Hello everybody and welcome to another session of A Very Thermomix Christmas. Today we are looking at Christmas party food. There are a range of recipes on Cookie Do for you to choose from, which means that you'll be able to create quite a spread. I'm doing 3 recipes for you today, all of which are very simple and that you can also get ahead with as well, so you're not madly rushing around in the kitchen whilst your guests are arriving. So we're going to start off with a baked camembert with mandarin jam and herb crackers. We're going to then move on to make some really simple cheese straws, and at the end we're going to make a hot artichoke dip, which will actually go really well with those cheese straws. So let's get started. So the beginning of the recipe, you would ordinarily make your mandarin jam. Because I needed it to cool down to taste later, I've already made it. Also, there isn't really anything to show you because it's literally putting the ingredients in the mixing bowl, cooking it for 15 minutes, and then just making sure it's set. Within all our recipes, there will always be a tip to show you how to check your jam is ready. You just put a saucer in the freezer. Once your jam is done, spoon it onto the saucer and give it a little push. If it wrinkles on the top, then it's ready. If not, then just add a couple of extra minutes on top. My jar has been prepared in the Thermomix as well. So when you are putting your jams in jars, you need to make sure that they've been cleaned properly and that they're warm. You can do that using the Varoma. Again, there will always be a tip on how to do that in every jam recipe on Cookie Do. I've got my jam here already, so I'm going to set that to the side until we need to taste it, and I'm going to get started on my crackers. So to start with, we're going to prepare our walnuts. I've got my walnuts here, and that's just going in the mixing bowl with some sugar and butter. So that's literally just 1 second. I've chopped my walnuts. They're sitting there lovely at the bottom. I don't even need to scrape it down. And now we're just going to warm them, and the sugar and butter is just going to create a lovely caramelized texture on the top of those walnuts. Okay, so my walnuts are done. Let's take a look at these. So hopefully you can see I've just got some roughly chopped walnuts, and they actually smell lovely and buttery and sweet. And I'm just going to transfer it to a bowl for later. All this is for this is just going to be sprinkled on top of my cheese later, and it's just going to give it just a little bit more texture. I'm using walnuts. You can use any nuts you like, and of course this is very versatile. You can use this to top your ice creams or serve it with any kind of sweet treats that you like. I'm going to set these aside. Okay, so I've set my walnuts aside, and now I'm going to make my crackers. My oven is preheating at 200 degrees, so all I need to do is put my ingredients in. So I've got here my plain flour, water, olive oil, I've got dried rosemary and some salt in there. And this is a great recipe because I literally just put it all in, mix it, and then my dough is done. Okay, so our dough is done. Let's have a look. There we go. It looks like quite a small quantity of dough. That's purely because we're going to roll our crackers really, really thin. And so actually you don't need a great deal of dough to make a good quantity of crackers. Okay. You can see my dough is kind of a little bit sticky. So all I'm going to do is tip my mixing bowl upside down, twist the mixing knives, and hopefully that'll loosen up some of my dough and make it a bit easier to take out. Okay, so we have our dough. I've just tipped it out onto my baking mat because once it's rolled out really thin, you're not going to be able to transfer it on later. It's easier to do it directly on here. Lightly floured my rolling pin, and I'm just going to roll it out really thin as I can. Okay, so my cracker dough is rolled out. I've rolled it as thinly as I can, just into a rectangle the size of my baking tray. It's not very neat. It doesn't really matter at all because we're going to cut them into the shapes that we want. If you want, you can just cut the edges and discard them. I tend to just leave them, bake them, and then I can nibble on them. And I've got a little snack for myself, and then I can keep the rest for my guests. So all I'm going to do is score my dough. It is up to you what kind of size you want. I'm going to make little squares. So you don't need to cut all the way through, but it doesn't matter if you do. All we need to do is score it. I'm making little squares just so that they make nice little bite-size pieces. It's going to be easier for my guests, you know, if it's not going to be a sit-down kind of situation, much easier to have food which is easy to handle. And again, it's up to you, sort of how uniform you want to make these. There we go. Now that that's scored, I am going to take my fork and just prick each one twice. All that's going to do is release some of the air and prevent it sort of like bubbling up when it's cooking, because we want nice flat crackers. You can do it much neater than I'm doing, but I also think it doesn't matter if you want to go for a more rustic look. That's what I tend to do with a lot of my cooking. I like cooking, I like eating, but I'm not necessarily the neatest person in terms of presentation, but I think that's fine so long as it tastes good. Okay, my crackers, I've pricked them with a fork. All I'm going to do is brush them with a bit of olive oil and then sprinkle it with a bit of extra salt. You can omit this step if you don't want them quite as salty. I think on crackers it's lovely to have a bit of salt. I'm using coarse salt. It's going to just give it a lovely bit of texture as opposed to using fine salt. And it's entirely up to you how much you put on, if any at all. Okay, so those are my crackers. My oven is preheating at 200 degrees, so I'm just going to pop them in the oven for 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, so everything is out of the oven. My crackers, when I came out of the oven, obviously they were in that sheet. Because I scored them before baking, super easy to just break them apart once they're done. They've got a lovely colour on them and a lovely snap to them as well. So I've got my crackers that have cooled down and become really lovely and crisp. If you want to make your crackers a little bit crisper, what you can do is at the end of your baking time, turn the oven off, leave your crackers in there for maybe another 10-15 minutes. Just keep an eye on them so that they don't get too dark, and you'll get an even crisper cracker that will give you that lovely snap. Then all I've got here, I've used brie today, but you can use Camembert. I topped it with a little bit of the Mandarin jam and then those walnuts that we had from before, from the very beginning of the recipe, put on top, and then just pop that into the oven for about 5 to 8 minutes, also at 200 degrees. So all I need is someone to come and taste for me. And I've got Ellie today to taste.
Hello.
I hope you're hungry, Ellie.
Oh, I'm starving.
So tuck in, we've got crackers.
Delicious.
You want to try and get a little bit, there's a spoon for you, a tiny spoon.
Brie is my favourite as well.
So you want to try and get a little bit of everything onto your cracker. Careful, it might be a bit hot, so you don't want to burn your mouth. How is it?
That is delicious. Oh, I can taste the rosemary in the cracker as well. And the it almost tastes like a honey for me for the brie. Reminds me of something. It's very festive.
Yeah, it's the jam, isn't it, that becomes all lovely and sticky on top.
Oh, I'll definitely be cooking this for my family.
Great, I'm glad you enjoy it.
Perfect.
Thanks for tasting.
Thank you.
Okay, that was such a lovely little mouthful. You've got the crispness of the cracker. You've got the lovely melted cheese. The jam on top is just a little bit sticky. There is extra jam. You're not going to put all of that on top. There is extra jam if you want it a little bit sweeter. Any leftover, you just pop in the fridge. You can have it on toast. You can have it on scones, anything you want. And then the caramelized walnuts on top also just adds that extra bit of texture. Such a lovely dish. The crackers you can prepare ahead of time, the jam you can prepare ahead of time. All you need to do on the day before your guests arrive is just pop your brie or camembert into the oven, literally for 5 to 8 minutes, and then it's ready to serve. So that's our first recipe done. Now we're going to move on to cheese straws. Okay, so our next recipe today is cheese straws. This is such a simple recipe. All it really is a short crust pastry with some cheese. What could be bad about that? So we're going to start by grating our cheddar. Okay, so our cheddar is grated. And if you have a look, all it was 5 seconds and you've got lovely grated cheddar. So that's in my mixing bowl. Now I'm gonna just add all my other ingredients. So I've got here plain flour, garlic powder, a bit of mustard powder, and an egg yolk. My butter, don't want to forget my butter. Now all I need to do is just mix it all together. Okay, so that's our dough done. Let's have a look. As with any short crust pastry in the Thermomix, you'll find that it comes out looking kind of a bit like breadcrumbs. But once you tip it out and give it a bit of a squeeze, bring it all together into a ball, then you will have your cohesive dough. So let's just get this all out of the mixing bowl. Oh, it smells lovely and cheesy. And we're just going to bring it all together into a ball. Okay, so I've brought my dough all together and I've just made it into sort of a slightly square shape because I'm going to try and roll it into a rectangle. And all I want to do is roll it to about 5 millimeters thick. My work surface is just lightly floured. It's not a very sticky dough, so you don't need loads of flour. My rolling pin is also just ever so lightly floured as well. Okay, so now my dough is all rolled out. I'm just going to trim the edges just so that we have a neater finish. But all my trimmings, they're not going to go to waste. I'm going to bring them together and just make some random shapes with those as well, so that I can use them when I bake. Just for my guests, I want to make them a little bit tidier. It doesn't matter if the pastry cracks a little bit. It is a very forgiving pastry. So like this bit here that's just come off, absolutely fine. If you just press it back in, pinch it together a little bit, and it's as good as new. No one would know. There we go. So I'm going to cut them into little sticks, but you can roll them out, use cookie cutters if you want, cut them into any shape you like. I think if you're, for example, having a drinks party, it is quite nice to have the straws because they're just quite easy to handle. So all I'm going to do is cut these into lengths about 1 centimeter wide. Again, doesn't matter that it's come apart. Press it back together and you've still got your lovely cheese straw, that shape. Okay, so I've got my first tray ready. I'm just put my trimmings aside and I'll re-roll them and prepare another tray once these are in the oven. But since I've got this tray ready, I'm going to get this in first. I've done 2 different shapes just because why not? And all I need to do before I put them in is just brush a bit of lightly beaten egg over the top. That's just going to give it a lovely colour and shine when it comes out of the oven. And then I've got Nigella seeds to sprinkle over the top. And of course, you can always use any kind of seed that you like. Poppy seeds would be nice, or sesame. If you did sesame, it might be nice to do a mixture of black and white just for that bit of colour. And it would give it sort of a little bit of a nutty flavour as well if you use sesame. But entirely up to you what your preference is or just what you've got in the cupboard really. So I've got my Nigella seeds, just going to sprinkle some over the top. So these are ready to go into the oven. It's preheating at the moment at 220 degrees and they're just going to go in for 7 to 8 minutes until they're lightly golden. Okay, so our cheese straws are out of the oven. You can see because of that egg glaze on top, it's got a lovely golden colour. You can serve them slightly warm. I just left them on the tray to cool completely, to have them cold. And then you can pre-make these as well before your dinner party and then just store them in an airtight container until you need them. So now I've got Sue who's going to come and help me taste them. Sue, would you like to have a cheese straw?
Certainly will. Lovely. Looks lovely. Thank you very much. I'm going to do this. That pastry is so light. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, it's very Moorish, isn't it?
You can have these dunked in hummus or...
Yeah, you can serve it with a dip. You can have them as they are. It's quite nice if you have a drinks party. You can just have these sitting around, have a nibble with a glass of Prosecco.
So light. Absolutely beautiful.
Great, I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
I'm going to carry on eating this. My dad's loved it.
All right, thank you,
very
Sue.
much.
Thank you. Right, so this cheese straw is so lovely and short, if you have a look at that, and it really does just melt in your mouth. The cheddar comes through so lovely, and it's such a lovely colour, and it looks really elegant if you're serving it to guests, to guests, or as gifts. This recipe is so great to serve to your guests because it's so quick. From start to finish, including baking time, it only took me 30 minutes to get these done. So if you've got last minute guests coming, you can just really easily whip up a batch of these. It's made of mostly things that you've already got in your cupboard: flour, butter, and cheese. And they're so elegant and would look so lovely served to your guests. So these are our cheese straws done. Our final recipe today is going to be a hot artichoke dip. Dips are great for when you have guests around because they're so easy to make, especially in your Thermomix. You've got so many options to choose from on Cookie-Doo. You've got your classics like hummus with all sorts of variations. You've got cold dips like there's an edamame dip, which is really lovely and refreshing, a bit lighter. But on a cold winter's day, I think there's nothing quite like a hot dip. I tend to, when I host a little dinner party, I'll maybe do a cold dip and a hot dip. The cold dip is so easy to prepare and just leave in your fridge until you need it. And then the hot dip you can prepare in advance as well, and then just put it in the oven before your guests arrive. So let's start. I've got my oven preheating at 200 degrees. And all I'm going to do to start with is grate my cheese. We're having quite a cheesy day today, but to be honest, I don't think that's ever a bad thing, is it? So I've got my cheddar in. Okay, so our cheese is done. Again, just 5 seconds and all my cheese is grated for me. So easy. I'm just going to set that aside. And as always, starting with the grating of my cheese in the recipe just means that I don't need to clean my bowl and it's ready to continue with the recipe. So what have I got next? I've got a garlic clove and I'm just going to chop that as well. Okay, so my garlic is lovely and chopped. I am just going to scrape that down ever so quickly. Then I'm going to add my artichokes and the oil. The artichokes are tinned artichokes. All I've done is halved them so they can go in with the oil. And we're going to chop. Again, just scraping down the sides, and then we're going to saute it for 3 minutes. So our artichokes and garlic have finished sauteing, and that smells so good. It smelled really, really garlicky just now. Even though it's just 1 clove of garlic, it smells so good as it was sauteing. And now I just need the rest of my ingredients. So in here I've got sour cream, cream cheese, salt and pepper, and our reserved grated cheddar, which we did at the beginning of the recipe. All we need to do is mix it. Okay, so it's finished mixing. It just mixed for 10 seconds, so it's super quick. And that's our dip basically done. All I need to do is transfer it to my baking dish. You can use any oven-proof dish. And that is going to go into my preheated oven for 15 to 20 minutes, and it's going to become lovely and golden and bubbly. Okay, so our dip is out of the oven. It's looking lovely and brown on top, and when it did come out, it was really hot and bubbling. I have just let this sit for 5 minutes because I don't want to burn our taste tester's mouth. And we're just going to try it with the cheese straws from earlier. If you want, you can serve it with toasted pita or any cracker of your choice, but we're going to use our cheese straws, which I did just cut into round shapes just to make it a bit easier to get as much dip as possible in each mouthful. So I'm going to invite Helen to come and taste our dip.
Smells so good, Terri.
Okay, so help yourself to a cheese straw.
Thank you. I actually made this for the first time last Christmas, and it
Yeah.
went down a storm in my household.
Great.
Hopefully I'm not going to burn my mouth.
You might just
again
want
with
to
this.
you might just want to blow on it because it is just hot from
I
the
already
oven.
know how delicious this one is. It's a lovely dip. Great job, Terri.
Thanks. It's so lovely. Creamy and warming, isn't it? Great, thank you. I'll bring this out to you later so you can have some more. So that is our dip. It is so lovely and creamy, so easy to make. You can make it ahead, pop it in the fridge until you're ready to bake. You might just need to increase the baking time a little bit if it is coming from the fridge, or just remove it from the fridge a little bit before you want to bake it so it comes up to room temperature. That's all for today. Next week, join us again when Jules will be making show-stopping desserts. We'll see you then.
Everyone get a little. Everyone get a little.
Oh,
You get into Zach?
I'm so excited. This is a lovely way of having baked camembert.
Go.
Oh, so good.
I'm gonna have another one.
This is the best.
honestly.
What is it about melted cheese and carbs? It's just
Never had it like that in a
unbelievable.
restaurant. It's like high end. It's delicious.
Yeah.
So what did you put on top of it?
It's a mandarin jam, and then the walnuts are just chopped and then warmed a bit with a bit of butter and sugar, so they're sort of slightly
You
caramelized.
should and you can.
Very good.
Amazing.
Very good.
Thanks, Terri.
You usually put a cranberry with it, don't you? So this is actually refreshing. It does something different, I find.
Yeah.
Mandarins are quite festive too, I think.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
Awesome. Right,
Go.
next one.